A tiny piglet, hid in a church pew, what the priest found below, shocked him. The piglet was hiding in the third pew from the front. Father Samuel Keene noticed it just after 6 o'clock in the morning when he came into St. Bartholomew's to light the candles before the first service. The church was dark except for the blue-gray dawn pressing against the stained glass windows. Rain tapped softly on the roof. The old stone walls held the cold of the night, and every footstep echoed down the aisle like the building was still half asleep. At first, he thought someone had left a bundle of cloth on the pew. Then the bundle moved. Father Samuel stopped beside the baptismal font. A tiny pink piglet peered out from beneath a hymnal shelf. Its ears were too large for its head. Its nose was muddy. Straw clung to its back. One side of its little body was smeared with dark, wet soil, and a red ribbon had been tied loosely around its neck. It trembled so violently the wooden pew seemed to shake with it. For one long moment, priest and piglet stared at each other. Father Samuel blinked. "Well," he said softly, "you are not on the parish calendar." The piglet made a thin, frightened squeal and backed deeper beneath the pew. Father Samuel set the candle lighter down and moved slowly, careful not to frighten it. St. Bartholomew's had seen many strange things in its 200 years. Bats in the bell tower, a fox in the cemetery, teenagers hiding behind the choir loft, one escaped sheep during a Christmas pageant, but never, as far as he knew, a piglet in the pews before morning prayer. "How did you get in here?" The piglet squealed again. This time, Father Samuel heard something else beneath the sound, a faint tapping from below. He froze. The church had a cellar beneath the nave, an old stone undercroft used for storage, spare chairs, Christmas decorations, archived parish records, sacks of donated clothing, and unfortunately a boiler that had been threatening to retire for the past 3 winters. Access to the undercroft was through a narrow wooden door beside the sacristy, but the tapping was not coming from the sacristy. It was coming from under the floor near the pew. Tap, tap, tap. Father Samuel held his breath. "Hello?" The piglet suddenly scrambled out, hooves slipping on the polished stone aisle, and ran toward the sidewall near the old floor grate. It pressed its nose against the metal cover and squealed. The tapping came again. Then a voice, small, muffled. "Help!" Father Samuel's heart slammed hard enough to hurt. He ran to the grate and dropped to his knees. "Who's there?" a child answered, weak and scared. "Please." Father Samuel fumbled for his phone with shaking hands. "This is Father Samuel Keene at St. Bartholomew's Church," he told emergency services. "There is a child trapped beneath the church floor. I can hear them through the old vent. Please send fire rescue and ambulance immediately." The dispatcher began asking questions, but Father Samuel was already moving. He hurried to the sacristy, unlocked the undercroft door, and pulled it open. Cold air breathed up from the stone steps. The bulb at the bottom flickered once, then died. He grabbed a flashlight from the utility shelf and descended carefully, his free hand sliding along the damp wall. The undercroft smelled wrong. Not just dust and old stone, smoke, not heavy smoke, not flames, but a bitter electrical smell mixed with damp straw and something metallic. "Hello?" he called again. "Can you hear me?" A child coughed somewhere in the darkness. Father Samuel swept the flashlight beam across boxes, folded tables, paint cans, and stacks of donation bags. The undercroft ran beneath the main church floor but narrowed near the front, where old foundation arches divided the space into low crawl passages. The sound came from the far side, behind a collapsed stack of wooden panels and storage crates. He moved toward it. The piglet squealed above him through the grate. "Stay there," Father Samuel called before realizing he was giving instructions to a pig. Then he heard another sound, a baby crying, not the child he had heard first. A baby. The sound came from somewhere deeper in the undercroft. Father Samuel stopped so abruptly his shoulder hit a stone pillar. "Oh God," he whispered. He moved faster. Behind the fallen panels, wedged in the narrow crawl space beneath the third pew, was a little girl. She was maybe 7 years old, wearing a yellow raincoat over pajamas, her face streaked with soot and tears. Her hands were dirty. One sleeve was torn. Beside her sat a wicker basket lined with a blanket. Inside the basket, wrapped in a blue towel, was a baby. The infant cried weakly, face red, tiny fists moving beneath the cloth. Father Samuel dropped to his knees. "My name is Father Samuel. I'm here to help you." The girl stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. "The smoke came," she whispered. "I couldn't open the door." "What's your name?" "Maddie." "And the baby?" "My brother, Toby." Father Samuel looked at the fallen crates blocking the narrow passage. He could reach Maddie, but the space around her was cramped and unstable. A broken board rested near her leg and old pipes ran overhead. He did not want to shift anything without help. "Maddie, are you hurt?" "My foot is stuck." The baby cried again. Father Samuel pulled off his coat and pushed it gently toward her. "Wrap him in this. Firefighters are coming." Maddie obeyed with trembling hands. Above them, the piglet squealed and scratched at the grate. Maddie looked up. "Rosie came back," she whispered. Father Samuel glanced toward the ceiling. "You know the piglet?" Maddie nodded. "She followed us." "From where?" The girl swallowed. "The farm." Before Father Samuel could ask more, a crackling sound came from the boiler room. Then a shower of sparks flashed briefly behind a half-open metal door. Father Samuel smelled smoke again, stronger now. The old boiler. He backed up, pulse hammering, and radioed dispatch through his phone. "I have located 2 children, 1 infant and 1 young girl beneath the nave. There is electrical smoke from the boiler area. 1 child is trapped. I need fire rescue fast." The dispatcher's voice sharpened. "They are on the way. Can you evacuate?" "Not without moving debris." "Do not put yourself in further danger if the structure is unstable." Father Samuel looked at Maddie, her small arms wrapped around the baby. "I understand," he said. But he did not leave. He climbed back toward the steps just far enough to grab the fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. The smoke near the boiler room was not yet fire, but something electrical had failed. He kept low, discharged the extinguisher toward the sparking panel, and coughed as powder filled the air. The sparks died, but the smell remained. By the time he returned to Maddie, sirens were wailing outside the church. The piglet's squealing grew louder. Firefighters burst through the side entrance minutes later, boots pounding on stone, radios crackling. Captain Elise Warren took command, following Father Samuel down into the undercroft with 2 firefighters and a rescue bag. Another team checked the boiler and cut power to the building. Paramedics waited above near the aisle. Captain Warren knelt near the crawl space. "Maddie, I'm Elise. We're going to get you and Toby out." Maddie clutched the baby tighter. "Don't take him first," she pleaded. "He'll cry." "We'll keep him right where you can see him," Elise promised. "But we need to make sure your foot is free." The firefighters braced the fallen panels, removed crates piece by piece, and cut through a broken board, pinning Maddie's ankle against a pipe. Father Samuel stood behind them, holding the flashlight steady, though his hand shook. Above them, through the floor grate, the piglet squealed every few seconds as if answering Maddie's soft cries. One firefighter looked up. "Is that a pig?" Father Samuel nodded. "That pig may have saved them." Nobody laughed. After 15 careful minutes, Toby was lifted first, wrapped in Father Samuel's coat, and handed to a paramedic through the cleared passage. Maddie panicked until Captain Warren turned the baby toward her so she could see him. "He's okay," Elise said. "Now you." Maddie was freed a few minutes later. Her ankle was bruised but not broken. She was coughing from smoke and dust, dehydrated, and shaking with exhaustion. When Father Samuel helped carry her toward the stairs, she looked toward the grate. "Rosie," she whispered. "Please don't leave Rosie." The piglet was still in the pew when they brought Maddie up. It had wedged itself beneath the hymnal shelf again, trembling, its muddy nose sticking out just enough to watch the rescue. Maddie reached toward it from the stretcher. "That's Rosie," she said weakly. "She found the church." Father Samuel looked at the tiny animal differently then, not as a strange visitor, as the first witness, as the one who had come upstairs when the children could not. The police arrived soon after, and the story they uncovered broke the heart of everyone in St. Bartholomew's. Maddie and Toby lived with their mother, Jenna Cole, on a rented farm outside the village. Jenna had been working nights at a care home, leaving the children with her boyfriend, a man named Aaron Pike. He had been angry, careless, and cruel in ways neighbors had suspected but never confirmed. That night, after a violent argument with Jenna before she left for work, Aaron drove away drunk, leaving Maddie and baby Toby alone in the farmhouse. Maddie awoke to the sound of Rosie squealing outside her window. Rosie was the runt of a litter from a nearby small holding, a piglet Maddie had secretly been feeding after finding it pushed away from the others. When Aaron once threatened to get rid of the useless little thing, Maddie hid Rosie in an old shed and visited her with scraps. That night, the piglet somehow got loose and began squealing near the house. Maddie, frightened by the silence and unable to reach her mother, gathered Toby in a basket and tried to walk to the church because she knew Father Samuel sometimes left the side door unlocked for early deliveries, and because, in her words, church means grown-ups. The walk was nearly a mile, in darkness, with fog and rain beginning. Rosie followed her. Maddie reached the church exhausted before dawn and entered through the side door, but instead of going into the nave, she heard a noise below. She thought someone might be there to help. She opened the undercroft door, went down the stairs, and the old door swung shut behind her. The latch jammed from the outside. In the dark, she tried to find another way up and crawled toward the floor grate beneath the pews. Then the storage panels collapsed and trapped her foot. The baby cried. The boiler began to smoke. Rosie, small enough to slip through gaps beneath the inner stair rail and up the side steps, managed to reach the church floor. Maybe she followed Maddie's voice. Maybe she followed the warmer air. Maybe she simply panicked upward toward light. But she hid in the pew. And when Father Samuel arrived, she squealed and scratched until he heard the tapping below. Jenna arrived at the church still wearing her care home uniform, hair unbrushed, face white with terror. She had come home to find the children gone, the front door open, and Aaron missing. Police had already called her by then, but nothing prepared her for seeing Maddie on a stretcher, Toby in a paramedic's arms, and a piglet wrapped in a towel beside the pew. Jenna ran to her daughter. "Maddie, baby, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Maddie cried then, not the quiet, frightened crying from the undercroft, but the full-body sob of a child who had held herself together too long. "I brought Toby," she sobbed. "I didn't leave him." Jenna held her face. "You saved him." Maddie shook her head and pointed at the towel bundle. "Rosie did." The piglet sneezed. Even Captain Warren cried. Aaron Pike was arrested later that morning after crashing his truck into a ditch 6 miles away. The case that followed involved child endangerment, neglect, assault, and more painful truths than the village wanted to admit. Jenna had to face not only what Aaron had done, but what fear and exhaustion had made her minimize. She cooperated fully with police, entered counseling, and took every step required to keep her children safe. No one pretended it was simple. Leaving dangerous people rarely is. But the children did not return to that farmhouse. They stayed first with Jenna's sister, then in a small cottage near the village where neighbors, social workers, and the parish quietly helped rebuild what had nearly been lost. Rosie became a point of debate. The health inspector said a piglet could not live in a cottage. The farmer who owned the litter said Rosie was too weak and not worth much. Maddie cried for 3 straight hours when she thought Rosie would be taken away. In the end, a compromise formed, as village compromises often do. Rosie would live at the parish garden, in a proper little shelter behind the church hall, cared for by Jenna, Maddie, volunteers, and anyone who needed an excuse to bring vegetable peelings to a heroic pig. Father Samuel said he had not expected to add pig management to his priestly duties. Then he built the shelter himself. The church changed after that morning. The undercroft was repaired, rewired, cleaned, and made safe. The old boiler was replaced after parishioners donated more in 1 week than the church had raised in 2 years. The jammed door was removed. New locks, alarms, and emergency lighting were installed. The floor grate beneath the third pew remained, but beside it Father Samuel placed a small brass plate, not with the children's names, not with the full story. Only this: listen below the silence. People asked what it meant. Father Samuel would smile sadly and say, "It means exactly what it says." Maddie recovered, slowly. Her ankle healed faster than her trust. She became frightened of closed doors, cellars, and raised voices. Toby, too young to remember, grew into a sturdy toddler who loved trying to feed Rosie entire apples through the fence. Jenna worked hard, made mistakes, apologized, tried again, and learned that safety was not just the absence of Aaron, but the presence of people she could call before fear made decisions for her. And Rosie grew. The tiny piglet from the pew became a round, pink, opinionated creature with a louder squeal than the church bell, and a talent for escaping every enclosure except the one Father Samuel built after consulting 3 farmers and 1 retired engineer. Children loved her. Gardeners feared her. The bishop during one visit asked politely why there was a pig behind St. Bartholomew's. Father Samuel said, "Long story." The bishop looked at Rosie, who was chewing the corner of a kneeler cushion someone had foolishly left outside. "I assumed so." Every year on the anniversary of the rescue, Maddie came early with Jenna and Toby. They sat in the third pew. They lit candles. They brought Rosie apple slices afterward. Maddie never liked being called brave, but she accepted that she had done something brave. There is a difference. When she was 12, she asked Father Samuel if God sent Rosie. He thought carefully before answering. "I don't know exactly how God works in such things," he said, "but I know love often uses whatever is willing to move." Maddie looked toward the garden where Rosie was snorting in straw. Even pigs, especially pigs apparently. Maddie smiled. Years passed, and the story of the piglet in the pew became part of St. Bartholomew's history. Newcomers heard versions of it, some more dramatic than others. Father Samuel corrected exaggerations. Rosie did not open doors. Rosie did not ring bells. Rosie did not lead a procession of angels through the nave. She hid. She squealed. She made him listen. That was enough. Maddie grew into a young woman who worked with children in crisis. She said she chose that path because she knew what it felt like to be small, unheard, and responsible for too much. Toby grew up with no memory of the Undercroft, but a deep attachment to pigs, churches, and his sister's hand in crowded places. Rosie lived to a good old age behind the parish hall, beloved and deeply spoiled. When she died, the whole village seemed strangely quieter. Maddie, then 17, asked that Rosie be buried in the garden near the wall where the morning sun first touched the grass. Father Samuel agreed. Someone suggested a marker. Maddie chose the words. "Rosie, she heard us below." On the day they buried her, Toby placed a blue towel in the earth because that was what he had been wrapped in when he was lifted from the Undercroft. Jenna placed the red ribbon that had once hung around Rosie's neck. Father Samuel placed one hand on the small wooden marker and prayed not only for an animal, but for all the children still waiting for someone to hear them. Years later, Maddie returned to St. Bartholomew's after finishing her training as a child advocate. The church looked the same in the morning light. Old stone, colored glass, polished pews, candles waiting to be lit. Father Samuel was older, slower, and grayer, but his voice still filled the nave with warmth. They stood together beside the third pew. "I used to think I failed because I got trapped," Maddie said. Father Samuel shook his head. "You carried a baby nearly a mile in the dark." "I was scared." "Of course. I still hear the tapping sometimes." "So do I," he admitted. She looked at the floor grate, then at the pew where Rosie had hidden. "I'm glad you listened." Father Samuel smiled softly. "So am I." Outside, in the parish garden, the morning sun warmed Rosie's marker. Toby, now tall and laughing with Jenna near the gate, stood where the pig shelter had once been. The church bell rang once, deep and steady over the village, and below the sound, in memory, there was still a tiny squeal from beneath a pew. So before we go, remember this. Sometimes help does not arrive looking strong. Sometimes it is muddy, trembling, pink-eared, and small enough to hide under a hymnal shelf. Rosie the piglet could not tell Father Samuel that Maddie and baby Toby were trapped below the church floor. She could not explain the locked undercroft, the smoking boiler, the collapsed panels, or the long, frightening walk from the farm. So she hid where he would find her. She squealed, she scratched. She led him to the sound beneath the floor. And because he listened, a little girl was freed, a baby was saved, a dangerous home was exposed, and a village learned that the cries we ignore do not disappear. They wait beneath the silence until someone finally hears.